It's wonderful to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us this morning or this afternoon or this evening on where you are based. This is our first gathering for 2021 of the Deans and Directors Cohort. And as we kick off our work for this year, I'd like us to acknowledge that this is a journey. It's been going on for nearly 4 years now. And today is an important milestone, as it's the first time that we've set a series of gatherings for the calendar year. And it's also the first time that we've asked deans and their learning partners to commit to a number of events or gatherings throughout the course of the year. It creates some rhythm, it provides a bit of certainty, and we are very grateful for the level of support that we've seen and the level of interest that there's been to join as learning contributors in the Deans and Directors Cohort. As you can probably already see around the room, we have a number of new joiners to the cohort, but also a number of familiar faces for those of you who's been on the journey with us. And in a few moments from now, we will have an opportunity to connect and reconnect with each other. And that is, after all, a big part of the work of the GRLI and of the Deans and Directors Cohort. It's building the relationships that are needed to sustain transformative change. I'm reminded of something when I read earlier today about how lithium batteries are not necessarily going to be the solution that we all hope that they're going to be, and that we need different types of innovation other than technological innovation. And so perhaps in a way, the relational innovation that can take place in a context like the Deans and Directors Cohort gives us a better shot at sustaining the transformative change that is needed. So on the cohort, it presents a unique opportunity. It's an opportunity for mutual learning and for creating impact, whether it's at individual, organizational, or systemic level. So regardless of your role within your institution or your intention for being here today, I'm encouraging all of us, and that includes the core team of myself and Claire Maxwell and Anders Aspling and Claire Summer, as well as those who's been helping drive this initiative, the deans that have been driving it, to cherish this as a learning experience. So what is the Deans and Directors Cohort? It's a safe, trusting space where deans and more frequently now also center directors, and we've had chief learning officers and senior leaders in companies, where you can work with peers on those difficult issues that you're facing, where you can find inspiration and where you can refresh for the work that lies ahead. It also offers a platform for those who are contributing to the learning to showcase and share their work about developing global responsibility. And it's increasingly acting as an incubator for collective actions that takes us towards meaningful and systemic impact. For instance, yesterday there was a side event to the Deans and Directors Cohort where a group of business schools from around the world are looking at developing a shared online course on sustainable transformation. The cohort operates as a community for global responsibility. So it's been called a community of impact rather than a community of practice. As I've already mentioned, it is stewarded by the various participants. So in other words, those who come to the cohort provides input into what is relevant in terms of learning and sharing. And we've seen over the last few years a core and evolving group of individuals that typically step forward to take initiative, to share their learning, to help shape various events or host specific gatherings. It's been scaled quite a bit. We've had more than 100 people to date, and with the participation that we have today, we've probably gone over 110 people that have now been part of the cohort over the years. And of course, it is held by the GRLI. We're an independent foundation for public benefit, and it's of course held in strategic partnership with key role players, including AACSB and EFMD. So before we kick off and get into the into the work and connecting with each other, just a few housekeeping points. I have started the recording, but we will not share anything that participants don't agree to share externally. And of course, whatever is said in small group discussions or amongst participants in breakouts applies or falls within the general Chatham House rules principles. This is a peer-based, participant-driven initiative. So obviously we build trust and we share with each other perhaps some things that are sensitive or not for public consumption. I mentioned earlier that there's a core team that supports this. Claire Maxwell, who you'll hear from shortly, who also happens to be the chair of the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative, but is here today in a co-facilitating role. Anders Aspling, who is the founding Secretary General of the GRLI and who acts as an advisor to the core team. And Claire Summer, who helps with amplifying the work of the GRLI. Our agenda for the next 2 days broadly follows the GRLI's inquiry. We have an arc of inquiry which spans me, we, and all of us. And today there will be an emphasis on the I to the we elements, with a shift tomorrow towards the all of us. And for those of you who this doesn't make any sense yet, you'll very quickly get up to speed. But if you look at the logo of the GRLI, it represents our emergent understanding of global responsibility, which requires integrative responsibility to the self, the other, and the whole, hence the me, we, all of us. Today, specifically, we'll have some onboarding and interactive introductions in a moment. Before we do that, we'll have a short opportunity just to locate yourself, and that will be held by Claire Maxwell. After interactive introductions, we'll have a plenary to take stock at various levels of the learning that has resulted not only from recent work in the cohort, but also the interesting context within which we all locate ourselves. We will deepen that learning to also take stock of or revisit our collective memory of previous cohort meetings. And we may make reference, for instance, to the dashboard of learning that some of you would have looked at or that you would have contributed. You may notice that I refer to learning or the work, sometimes interchangeably. The work that we're here to do is not only about what I do, but also about who I am. In other words, how I exist, how I operate, and what I bring to the work and what I learn from that. So as we take stock, for instance, of the various actions and initiatives that has emerged from the cohort or that's ongoing within your own context or institutions, there may be learning that sits at a different level, that is not operational, tactical, or initiative or project-based. There may be learning that is more strategic, philosophical, conceptual, personal. In other words, the cohort is not only about initiating projects, it may lead to various actions. For instance, we would love to hear today, and I'm sure many of you would, to hear from other deans about what they've learned over the past year about themselves, about their colleagues, about their students, about their planning, and what knowledge they will be taking with them as they prepare for 2021 and beyond. So we will not only bring learning from the previous cohort meetings into today, but we will also acknowledge and draw on your own recent individual and institutional learning. And we will do so in ways that are appreciative. We encourage constructive and and constructive curiosity. So when you hear from someone else, be open to being surprised, to gathering new insights, to opening new avenues of inquiry. So in summary, today we're going to locate ourselves individually and organizationally in our context. We'll be discovering our own aspirations, what opportunities exist within the cohort, what capabilities we have that can support us on in our respective learning and work. And then on day 2, we'll move towards how might all of us create more volume for the various actions, initiatives, and possible collective actions that emerges from the cohort. So without any further ado, I'm conscious that some of you may be very new to this, we're going to give you an opportunity to locate yourself. And to do that, I'm going to hand over to Claire Maxwell, and then we'll take it from there. Claire, over to you.
Thanks very much, John. Great to be with you, and so good to see so many people. For those of you who are new to the cohort, it may be worth sharing that the GRLI pioneered, well, over 15 years ago, if not longer, something called whole person learning. And whole person learning invites us to contemplate and practice the fact that knowledge lies not only in our brains, but also in our whole selves. We have to bring, or we need to bring, we're required to bring our whole selves to bear on any endeavor that we may be engaged in any relationship that we may be in, if real change, sustainably long-term change is to take place. Knowledge is located not only in our brains, but also in our bodies, in our intuition, in our spirit. Creating new possibilities and co-creating an alternative future, again, requires us to disrupt our habitual ways of thinking and doing. We need to make room for a different way of paying attention, to hear what is not being said, to see what we cannot see, be seen, and to begin to know the unknowable. And so I'm going to invite you to take a few minutes to be with yourself in the company of others, in the company of people in this Zoom room, to create a gap in our usual patterns of physical, psychological, and mental activity, to become simply aware in order that we can bring more of our whole selves into our connecting, into our conversations, into our actions. You may not like this way of doing things, and if you don't, I do understand, but I would ask you just to suspend disbelief for 3 minutes. That's all it's going to be. And you may discover something, you may be surprised, but just allow yourself to be a little bit more open. And so to begin, I'd like to invite you to begin by just stretching a little, but shaking out the day so far. If you want to stand up, you can do, and just allow yourself to shake out the day that you've had so far, just to release yourself. Just a few minutes, just stretch your limbs, wiggle those toes if that's the most that you feel you can do at the moment. Just feel those toes wiggling. Loosen up your body with a refreshing shake out if you want, but just however you want to do it. And then when you're ready, settle back into your seat and find a comfortable seated position. Lovely. Some beautiful shaking, I have to say, has just taken place. Okay, now, simply become aware of your body. Just start to sense its weight, its position, and something about the inner space. And either close your eyes, or if you wish, lower your gaze. After a while, just center your attention at your base, your seat, where your body is supported by whatever you're sitting on. Feel the weight of your whole body and how it is planted on the earth. Trusting yourself to the earth's solidity. You are held, you are safe. Let your body really settle and be at ease. Appreciate the simplicity of being bodily present here and now. And say the word grounded softly to yourself. Grounded. Next, bring your attention to the head region. Concentrate on your sense of hearing. Be open to any sounds in the environment, especially the kind we don't usually hear. Also, try to notice the larger quality of silence that surrounds whatever you hear from moment to moment. The silence in between. Sense the whole space around you. Extend it even beyond the walls, even to including those of us who are with you today. Experience the vast panoramic quality of awareness and say to yourself softly, aware. Now, move your attention into the center of your chest, and if you wish, place your hand gently over your heart and experience the quality of presence. You are simply here, alive, breathing, feeling, experiencing your existence. It's happening right now, at this very moment. Softly repeat the word present. And finally, let your attention encompass your whole body and repeat to yourself, grounded, aware, present. And just rest there for a few seconds. Then gently open your eyes or raise your eyes and extend your grounded, aware presence to include the environment around you and those of us who are with you on this call. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Claire. And we have an opportunity now to locate ourselves in relation to one another across the globe. And I must say, we have a wonderfully diverse group of contributors to the cohort's learning that are convening here today. What I'm trying to do, and which we will go into in a second, is we have some breakout rooms, more or less random. We've tried to ensure that you're not in the same group as some of your learning partners, just so we have a bit of geographic spread as well. And this is an opportunity to connect with colleagues from around the globe, new and old, and to briefly acknowledge the current context, hear about the trajectory of each of those who are here today, and to start to formulate the questions and ideas that you bring into the cohort. So as you go into the room, we're suggesting a short round of introductions, preferably with reference to your whole person, not only your CV, but just share a little bit about yourself, just to get a better sense of who all's in the room. and of course, what questions you bring or what question you bring to today's gathering. So the headline for our first breakout is Where are you? Where are you now? And we're going to allow, with breakouts of roughly 6 people per room, we're going to allow 20 minutes. We'll see you back in the main room in 20 minutes from now. Where are you now? If you felt that there wasn't quite enough time to connect with everyone that you met or that you reconnected with, please be assured that there will be plenty more time later today and again tomorrow, of course, to share, to connect. Now, what we're going to hear now is, and this is an opportunity to have your voice heard in plenary so that we have a better sense of who all's in the room with us. What you're going to hear now is what people are arriving with and where they find themselves. Now, you may have a question, you may have something you want to offer, you may have a hope or a wish or a deep desire, you may have a concern or something that you're excited about. But whatever it is, we'd like to ask you to state it as in a tweet length. So our aim is to have under 60 seconds per person. But before we kick off, maybe what we'll do is we'll give everyone 60 seconds just to formulate what it is that you'd like to share. But the easiest way that we found is I will then just follow the order that I see on screen so that we don't take up too much time in moving from the one person to the next. In sharing your 60 seconds about where you are now, you may just want to kick off with saying, I'm John, I'm in South Africa, I'm with the GRLI, and then share your offering or your question or your hope. Another suggestion, if you have an A4 piece of A4 paper or letter-sized paper with you, or even bigger, you are welcome to take that piece of paper and a marker and maybe summarize what it is that you're sharing in one word, so that when you share, you can hold it up. And once we've heard from everyone, we should have a picture of who we are here and now. So without any further ado, we're going to allow 60 seconds of quiet time. Grab a piece of paper or type it up and just formulate in the next 60 seconds what it is that you'd like to share out into the plenary so that we have a better sense of who you are and why you're here. Thanks. Okay, so we're going to kick off the round. We have a very strict timekeeper. Let me just ask her to unmute herself. So that's Claire. We can just hear your voice.
So I'll say time when we hit a minute.
Wonderful. And then we're going to move on to the next person. So we get a quick fire round of sharing. Okay. So I'm going to kick off the bottom right of my screen. Clara.
That's what happens when you arrive late, right? You're the first to speak. So I'm Clara, just outside Lisbon for the week, in the countryside, listening to the birds and to everything that's happening around here to try to gain some perspective on what I'm supposed to do. Because my feeling these days is that I am tired. That's what best describes my state of mind right now. I am very tired. And that's conditioning the way in which I'm thinking about things and the way in which I'm implementing lots of changes at the same time. So that's my thought. I'm tired. And I'm afraid that this might be shared by others as well. I don't know. That's all I want to say.
Thanks, Clara. Moving on, Nikos. Oh, you're going to have to unmute yourself. Okay, sorry, just on a housekeeping note, there you go. So if I call your name, just make sure you're unmuted. Thanks, Nikos. Please go ahead.
Nikos Kouris, St. John's University.
To see your paper.
Well, it's okay. It says, "These too shall pass." Thank you.
Thanks, Nikos. Moving on, Maury.
Good morning, good evening, all. Yes, tired for sure, Clara, and stressed. And I think when we get stressed, of course, we know from research, we return to the first principles, we recede into our earlier self, not necessarily our most effective self. So one thing about being here with everyone today is just to connect more outside, so as to broaden that back out and think more generally. But the other thing is, given the dean's role that I hold, it is very much about alleviating some of the stress for others and supporting others to help them get through the time that we hope Nikos shall pass. But how do you do that? And one of the things I've been working on for the whole time is ways to do that. And I'm really keen to find out what other people are doing by way of supporting your teams, because this is the thing I feel the most kind of incumbent on me to do.
Thank you, Maury. Moving on to Vasu. Sasim.
Hi. Good evening from Bangkok, Thailand, in a humid day, 34 degrees Celsius in Bangkok. Hi. To me, I think I'm now in an interesting time when I used to be worried about my computer getting infected with virus, but right now I need to worry about myself getting infected with virus. So I think it makes me kind of worried a bit with the situations right now. But still, I definitely agree with Nikos that this too shall pass. Thank you.
Let's hear from Van Gray.
Yes, I think I tried to put a paper here. I don't know if you can see this or not, but
sorry, I mistakenly muted you, Van. My apologies. Just unmute yourself. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think the one word that I'm most interested in is realistic. Realistic, metrics, realistic initiatives, realistic goals. The pandemic has certainly, I think, given us an opportunity to step back a bit and reflect on what we really, what's really important for us to try to measure, and maybe we're not measuring the right things. Maybe we're not embracing the right kind of things for our students and for the academy. And so I think maybe just if we can inject some kind of realism from the pandemic, that maybe moving forward will be better.
Thank you, Van, and apologies again for muting you there. Moving on, just checking, Deb Dutta. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Right. Good evening from India, and my name is Devdatta, and I am from Vauxhall, which is in Hyderabad, India. And as I was talking, we are in the middle of the second wave of the pandemic, and we started with online classes this year and then moved to physical classes and hybrid classes, and again it seems like we'll move back to online classes. So my reflection of the entire year as we look back is more on the transformation and how do we adapt and how do we change and how do we become more relevant in terms of delivering value to the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Devduta. Moving on to Metawe.
Hello, good evening all. It's very I feel very honored to be here. It's our first time joining session from Sasin School of Management in Thailand. And what I wanted to share was that we are trying to drive impact at our school, but learning from others during the breakout room, we found that not only we need to drive impact, but we have to do it in a way that it's inclusive and taking care of ourselves as well.
Thank you, Metawe. Moving on to Julia.
Okay, good morning, good evening, everyone. So I'm Julia Christensen Hughes, the founding dean of the Gordon S. Lang School of Business and Economics at the University of Guelph, just outside Toronto in Canada. And as I shared with the earlier group, as dean, I had a number of pretty audacious goals, but most significantly for us to become named, to become ranked, and to become accredited. And all three of those goals were achieved. The goal of becoming ranked was really interesting because it caused us to do an assessment of the rankings and identify one that wouldn't cause us to compromise our vision, which was to develop leaders for a sustainable world. And so we found corporate knights, and our MBA is now ranked #1 in Canada, our BCom #2 in Canada on the corporate knights metrics. But through that process, I became aware of the perverse effects of the other traditional rankings. Okay, and I'm working on that, working to change the system and rankings. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks so much, Julia. Wendy Murphy. Wendy.
Hi, I'm Wendy Murphy from Babson College. I'm outside of Boston, and we are re-engaging in GRLI. We've had some tumultuous leadership changes. In the pandemic, I've been working from home and I'm on campus on occasion. I guess my one word after those conversations is this.
Wonderful.
What's the word?
With hope.
Thanks, Wendy. Moving on to hear from Rahul.
Hi, good evening, everybody from India, along with my colleague, the doctor who spoke. My word, let's see if you can see it. It's a notebook, it's not an A4, but nevertheless, is Stoicism. As you know, Stoics is a physiological movement, which I believe we all should reflect on, especially now. Guidelines. We need to recognize what we can really control and we cannot control. As my colleague mentioned, we are undergoing right now a second wave. So we had the students on campus, and effect tomorrow we have to vacate again. So repeat the performance as the last year. We have learned how to react to crisis. I believe this is true for all of us, how to deal with it accordingly. And of course, shifting from physical to online, it's a huge dynamics to it. And I think it's important to learn as well how to master our own skills and understand what we need to be more virtuous on. And that is something which we are all working on, especially as in our positions, I believe is critical in order to handle the overall daily activities. That will be it from me. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Rahul. I'm so glad Watson can join us. Moving on to Jeff. That's LMU.
Yes, good morning, Jeff Thies. I direct the Institute for Business Ethics and Sustainability at Lower Marymount. I would say that I'm showing up colored by a couple of experiences. My oldest son is home for a few days. He lives in Boulder, Colorado. Oh. There was a mass shooting in Boulder last night, and to feel that through his heart and to watch him and his deep concern for those he loves and his friends, his girlfriend, and just the proximity of that and just the profound brokenness that represents, so endemic in our culture. And at the same time, last week, our institute hosted 13 African-American women entrepreneurs, and the seminar was on grit and resilience, and the statement of hopefulness and the commitment to their passions and their dreams is so profound. And so I'm really carrying both of those things. So Wendy, I wrote down hopeful too on my paper, but I was thinking as reflecting on this of something out of American history called the Stockdale paradox, which is came from somebody who was a prisoner of war who said that what you need is an absolute grounding in fact and what is currently true without any varnishing, and the confidence that you will triumph.
Time.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jeff, for that sharing, and of course our thoughts with the community in Colorado. Cindy?
Good morning, everyone. Cindy Dunn from the Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University in Toronto. Not to diminish or take away from the grief people feel or the stress and feelings of being tired. But I said to my group, on the scale of just surviving or thriving, I'm thriving. This has been, it's been obviously a very difficult time, but I've been very focused on being grateful for not having to commute, being able to spend time focusing on my health and getting the rest that I need. And so, yeah, I just feel grateful that I've had this time to be able to sort of get myself centered again and feeling healthier and more rested than I had in a long, long time.
Thanks for sharing where you are now, and also just reminding everyone that if there's anything that you'd like to add in terms of what you're sharing, please do use the chat. I noticed that Wayne has just posted the concept that Jeff was referring to.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. Moving on to Kathy Dubois.
Thank you. My word that I wrote down was change. I have throughout my life really enjoyed change. And I always anticipate that change is going to be for the better. It isn't always. But I do have a feeling that we are emerging from this time, which has been very challenging for some, very nurturing for others, and that really good things will come. I think there are a lot of things that many of us have been working on during this quieter time that we look forward to rolling out. I'm very uplifted by the political changes we've had in the United States, which I think bodes well for the whole world. And we're just getting started. So I think that this next year is going to be filled with a lot of good, constructive, needed change.
Thank you, Kathy. Jumping across the ocean, Hannah, I know. There you go.
Thank you. So what I wrote down, can't see anything.
Oh,
it's me. So I wrote down in between. I feel like in many ways, I feel like being in between things, in between life before COVID, between and the life after COVID. Now we're somewhere partly trying to struggle, partly thriving, like Cindy said. I'm in between. Today in Finland, I'm between winter and spring. Professionally, I also feel being between something that was and maybe something new to come, which I don't completely know yet what will be there, but new doors seem to be opening. So I'm very much in between, which is partly a good feeling too. An interesting time. Confident about the future, just like Kathy said, but the changes.
Thank you for sharing. Moving on to Wayne.
Thanks. So my word is regeneration, and my reason for being here is kindred spirits. And let me try and put that into a sentence. So I'm Wayne. I'm an African living in Norfolk in England, very privileged to be surrounded at the moment by birds and pigs and cows and sheep and the countryside. I'm representing a Belgian institution, Antwerp Management School. I'm working as a pracademic, expressing myself as a poet, connecting with kindred spirits around the world like yourselves, with an aspiration to move business and society beyond responsibility and sustainability towards regeneration.
Thank you very much, Wayne, and looking forward to seeing the manuscript of the new book.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on, Dale.
Yeah, my word was builder. From a very young age, I was into Legos, and I don't know that that's changed. Metaphorically, I'm still playing with Legos. You know, similar to Maury, I think my role as a leader is to make other people feel strong, to inspire, for collective action. And my joy comes from building programs and opportunities that inspire action. And I believe that this crisis is really an opportunity to grow and learn, you know, function like a McKinsey-ish nerve center that makes those connections. There was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday that talked about employee engagement and those who are engaged and those who are disengaged. And in this crisis, it can be learned helplessness, or you can say, hey, what are the new knowledge, skills, and knowledge, skills, and abilities that we learn in a crisis like this? And then what is your role as a leader to ensure that people feel that strength, that they feel strong and enabled, and that you give them a reason to come to work and a reason to change. And I really believe that this crisis is kind of a wake-up call that will make it easier to build, whether it's on the corporate level or at our universities and with our students, that they are stronger. They don't know it quite yet, but they will come out of this.
Time.
Thanks, Dale. Mark.
Hi, my word's excited. Oh, this is back to front maybe. And I feel a bit guilty saying that, because I also had the same thing with a class the other day where I asked them how they felt about change over the last 12 months. And as students, they'd had a tough life, but as a dean, it's both been tough, but also exhilarating. And I think it doesn't, like Cindy said, and Kathy, doesn't underplay the loss that people have experienced or the hardship experienced, but there's been a certain amount of excitement in that and learning new skills. And I think particularly in my current situation, as I move from France to South Africa, I'm kind of excited about the opportunities for business schools and how it's forcing us perhaps to open up, to restructure our programs, think about access for different groups of students, and perhaps play a role in terms of the difficulties that young people particularly will be facing when we come out of this.
Thanks, Mark. And hope to see you on our shores shortly. Noreen Sharp.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So it's been a tough year. I'm in my 5th year as dean at St. John's University here in New York. And as Dale and Julia can relate, it's a demarcation point, it's an inflection point where we look back and say, what have we been able to accomplish with our faculty at the university? And we've improved teaching, research, and reputation, which were the 3 goals. And yet, the more you improve, the more work you realize that you have to do, hence continuous improvement. So my word is progress with a question mark. And I need to be revitalized and rejuvenated and really sort of regroup and look ahead to the next 5 years. We're in the midst of a big curriculum reform at the moment. And, how can we make real progress in infusing the SDGs in our curriculum in a way that's sustainable, cost-effective, and meaningful and transformative for the students? And that's a big question mark right now.
Time.
Thanks. Thanks, Noreen. Progress question mark. Faizia.
Thank you. I'm late to the party, so I'm assuming there is a word theme going on. And actually, Noreen stole my thunder. I was thinking of progress myself. It's been less than a year that I have been in the position. So I transitioned into the deanship during the pandemic. But I would say that, you know, a lot has been accomplished in the 9 months. And that's because there is direction, there is progress, and faculty are craving for that. I see that the faculty are more productive at my institution, and things are moving along in this new environment as normal. So this has become the new normal, I would like to say. And faculty are adapting to that. Obviously, things won't be the same as they were pre-pandemic, but you know, what does the new normal look like is what we are trying to discover for ourselves right now. And I would say that that's kind of what my theme is.
Thanks, Faizia. Just checking whether, I know, Anne, that you had to deal with something. Anne Magra, are you currently on? Here you go. Just unmute yourself.
Thank you, John. All right, I'm an overachiever. I have 3 words. I don't know if you can see that. I have committed, tired, and grateful. You know, I'm increasingly committed to this work and excited by the opportunities. That means that I'm increasingly tired, and I find myself spending a lot of time questioning priorities because, you know, there's a limited amount of time and energy that we have, and where do we place that? And it makes me grateful for the team that I work with and for opportunities. Because this is where you draw energy, right? This is where you have the chance to come back and center and be reminded that you're not alone in the work. I'm never alone because I always have Lisa and Maury, but it's wonderful to get back with all of you and to hear the work you're doing and to be reminded of why we do this. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Anne. And your colleague Lisa is next in row. So Lisa, over to you.
Okay, well, so my one word would be Janus, as in the two-faced god. That's kind of where I feel like I am. I'm looking forward and backward, and trying to continue to look forward. Because when I look backward, and I'm weary, I feel like I'm a hamster running on a wheel, and like, am I getting anywhere at all running on that wheel? And when I look forward, I feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm sitting outside, I can hear the birds, and there's hope, and there's a future, and there's beauty. And so I'm trying to keep my face forward.
Thanks, Lisa. Linda from St. John's.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linda. Good morning from New York. Good early morning, good afternoon, good evening to my colleagues across the globe. I guess the word for me would be engagement, because I do feel I come to this with the challenges of engaging the whole institution in global responsibility initiatives. I'm lucky to work in an institution where the dean has a real concern with these issues, and the university itself is very social justice oriented, but trying to engage everyone in a context that is peppered with lots of constraints at this time especially is a challenge.
Thank you, Linda. Moving on over to Cardiff in Wales, Rachel.
Hi, good afternoon. I'd say exhausted, but still determined. So today is a National Day of Reflection in the UK. So to commemorate a year since the lockdown and 130,000 people who died from COVID. So it's one of those days where I think there's a lot of contemplation. So you feel sad and actually also a little bit angry by why we weren't more resilient to this. And I think we've all got a big role to play in analysing why we didn't have that resilience and putting it in place. I think there are lots of opportunities from COVID. I saw staff and students very engaged in those opportunities, but I've seen a shift back to just wanting normality. I think it's just the exhaustion and the tiredness, and that worries me a little bit that we're going to miss some of those opportunities. So I'm hoping that I'll get some inspiration so I can remain focused on that change, which I think we need to deliver as a result of the crisis.
Thank you, Rachel. Sticking to that part of the world, John Knights.
Hi, I'm John Knights, Chairman of Leadership Global. We've just joined GRLI as an associate partner, although I've been involved as an individual associate for a couple of years. I guess my main purpose today to be here is in order to listen. Already just listening to all you people speak for 1 minute is very, very interesting indeed. I think that I've been lucky that I haven't really suffered very much, both because of my age. I don't have children to look after. And also that our organization is a virtual one, and we've been working remotely before the pandemic, and we're still working remotely around the world. And so I think that what I've spent my time differently during the pandemic doing than I was doing before is building new networks, because
Oh, John, you're muted.
Sorry, Marie. Thanks.
Thanks, John. So I'm Marie Stensek. I'm Deputy Dean at the School of Business, Economics and Law at the University of Gothenburg, Sweden. The first word that comes to my mind when you ask for it, John, is inspiration, because that is kind of what I think of when I think of the Dean's Cohort, to get inspired by all of you, and hopefully maybe give some inspiration to some of you as well. And in these times, I'd say that's quite important to me, since I feel what the COVID, and maybe I'm not tired or exhausted, but it's easy to get unfocused, and it's kind of that you cannot work as much as you, or I cannot do as I used to do, because I cannot focus, and I hope for you to get inspiration from you, but also kind of help to find how to be dedicated where I am right now. And yeah, I think.
Thanks, Marie. So focus is definitely something that I also struggle with. I resonate. So moving on, and we've nearly heard from everyone. Let me just see, Ilka.
Hi, yeah, I'm Ilke Njolo. I'm at the University of Exeter Business School. I had 2 words which I also discussed in the group. So it's actually well-being, which has of course come to the forefront, not just with COVID, but our psychological and mental, and the link with sustainability in terms of sustainable performance, but also circular economy and sustainable businesses, because I think one can't go without the other. And that might be obvious, but just the whole last year is that kind of brought to, I think, everyone's forefront.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilka. I think last but definitely not the least, Anicia.
So hello, I'm Anicia from France, from Cage. I'm Dean for less than 1 month. I'm Associate Dean for Inclusivity. And my word is
change.
Change, yeah, because I know that it was a word of some of you before, but because I think we are facing changes. I am facing changes. I have courses today face-to-face with students, and it changes everything. And as I said, I'm associate dean for less than 1 month. So my concern is how to have a new position in this weird time, and how to engage people when you are not face-to-face and when you begin something new. And maybe to come back to other words of people, it's about metrics, how to measure the right things, to be sure to improve the right things in this change. You are mute, John, I think.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Anicia. Just checking, no one's been skipped? Is anyone okay? Good. Thank you very much for sharing and what we've heard, and also thank you, Claire, for keeping time so diligently. What we've heard is giving us a picture of who's in the room, and I think what we're going to try and do. Let me just see if we can do this. For those of you who have written down your word, maybe let's just take 5 seconds and everyone just pick up that word and just hold it up, because we can maybe take a little picture of it. Okay, just give me, I'm going to count down from 3, 2, well, Mark is still scribbling furiously. There we go. 3, 2, 1. Okay, we've got that captured. Let me just save it so that we have it for prosperity. Or what's it? Posterity. What's the word?
Posterity.
Posterity is okay too.
That also works.
Prosperity is good too. Hannah-Lena, you had your word and it kept disappearing into the background. So, but if you put it in chat, we'll make sure we'll catch it.
Funny, prosperity was posterity. Prosperity is just around the corner, is what they sang during the Depression. But you could say the same for posterity if you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So we have a better sense of who we are, and we are here now. And I do want to acknowledge that I see our colleagues from Watson have had to dial off. They're dealing with some emergencies around the second wave in India. I noticed earlier on that they were both on the mobile phone, so there is some emergency meeting that they need to head off to, and they've posted their apologies on the chat. We will now be shifting from who's in the room to the learning that exists in the room. And having heard what we heard just now, we kind of anticipated this. We thought what we'll do is we'll follow a generative process, that allows us maybe to deepen over a couple of rounds, because I know that there's some of you who at the previous meeting noted down some specific ideas and initiatives or intentions related to the cohort. But what we're also hearing here is that there's learning from the past year, experiences and learning to share about yourself, about your colleagues, about your students, about your planning, and that learning is perhaps not related to what you jotted down in November or what you stated as an aspiration. So you may now hold new knowledge or new insight that you'll be taking with you and that you can share. And so we thought what we'll do is we'll take stock of some of the lessons learned, given the reality that we're facing. And we can be taking stock at an individual, an organizational, or a systemic level. But before we get into the specifics of projects and initiatives and actions that you're taking, we want to take a step back and just recognize that it has been an extraordinary year, and to stand still for about 20 minutes on what we are learning about the work, about ourselves and each other. And that brings us to what learning we can develop further within the context of this cohort. So this is an opportunity to reconnect, and we're going to do this in small groups again. It'll be slightly different groups. We're going to reconnect with our recent experiences and learning, again, 5-6 people per group. We're going to recognize the extraordinary year that we've experienced, and we've already heard some of the themes coming out in the last round. And we'll ask you, and you'll be asking ourselves, what are we learning about the work, ourselves, and each other? So I know that some of you may be rearing to go with an update on a specific initiative or action, but we're not quite there yet. So when we come back from this second breakout, we'll ask you just to report anything that stood out. We're not going to hear a round from everyone. It'll only be a report back on anything that stood out or that you think may be helpful to share with the group as a whole before we move on to getting sense of where various initiatives and actions are that people can get involved in. Okay, so I hope that that's clear enough. I'm just going to look to gaze over to Claire Maxwell Hernandez, just if there's anything that you'd like to add at this stage in terms of setting up this next breakout.
No, I would say, John, that's fine. What we learned over the last year, and what of that learning and knowledge that we bring with us as we prepare and plan for 2021 and beyond.
Great.
And I'd like to suggest, having heard what we've heard, John, that we go for 25 minutes and we'll reorganize the time. I think it just gives a bit more opportunity to engage a little deeper.
Okay, good.
A lovely sight.
Okay, am I unmuted? Yes, I am. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. We have an opportunity now to report on anything that stood out from that conversation. And that may be something that you heard or that you experienced or an insight that you gained that you think at this point in time will be helpful if you shared it with the group as a whole. So we're not doing a round. We're not asking everyone to report back. We're not asking for a report back per group. We are simply holding a space to hear if there is anything that stood out and that you feel a burning need or desire to share with the group as a whole. And I hope sincerely that there's some inspiration that's been gleaned from participating in that last round of discussion. And we're going to hold 4 or 5 minutes, depending on how much there is, before we move on. Feel free to simply unmute yourself when if you have something that you'd like to share.
Sure, I'll jump in. I was, in our group, we talked, a little bit about how we talk a lot about the challenges that we've all faced during this time. And how do we find the way to respect the challenges that people are facing, but turn and pivot the emphasis to resilience and what we've accomplished and the change we've been able to make during this period, and sort of turn it into a positive, but not, this was Ilka's point, turn it into a positive without, discounting the challenges and the hard work that people have put into it.
Sure. John, I'll jump in. It's Marianne. We talked a lot about the importance of communication and how that has risen in priority and importance this past year. Also talked about the fact that we're not going back to normal, whatever normal may be, that this experience in the past year has likely changed how we deliver and value and provide graduate education forever. Our faculty and students are now preferring a hybrid model or flex model, which would be a mix of face-to-face and synchronous learning going forward. So lots of changes, lots of changes.
Yeah,
we just maybe to talk about what we were talking during the session. We think that online courses and conferences were much more inclusive according to a part of anonymous chat and so on, and that we can speak even if we are shy, and the students sometimes they can talk on the chat, so it's much more inclusive, and much more inclusive for some countries where sometimes we have nobody for a conference because we have an issue of fundings, and at the same time it's not inclusive according to the Wi-Fi conditions sometimes for the students or for the professors. So we have a balance between inclusivity and non-inclusivity for the online things.
Thanks, Anicia.
Wayne.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Linked to this issue of challenges, it's been a challenging year, of course, for everyone. But we talked a little bit about how the anxiety that's associated with anticipating problems is often worse than living through the problems. So when you're in it, you cope, you adapt. Sometimes you're surprised, people come together, people support. And so I think while we're all quite tired and stressed and so on, we should try to take the energy away from the anxiety about the future and just realize how resilient we are. And also when we're worrying about the future generations, those young people and all the crises they have to face and how tough it's going to be for them, well, they have a different baseline. They will cope as well. They will flourish in their own ways. So there was a little bit of that being in where we are and not worrying as much about what we can't control, and which may not be as bad as we think it is once we live through it.
Thanks, Wayne. Anyone else? Just checking. Julia.
Yeah, I'll jump in and build on what Anisha was saying. We were wondering about faculty travel and our own travel to conferences and what's going to happen down the road. Now that we've figured out we can attend more conferences without leaving our homes, that so many more people from around the world are able to join us, right? So it's our carbon footprint, it's also our time and financial resources. And what's the future going to hold for the academic conference that has been, you know, such a mainstay of our practice, and even for GRLI, if we're expected to lead by example, when will we personally feel comfortable to travel again? So I think that's going to be an interesting change for all of us to think through, and on what basis will we approve faculty travel?
Thanks, Julia. Anyone else? Okay, and we'll continue to have opportunity to share, but it's wonderful to just to get a glimpse of some of the questions arising, some of the insights, we're now moving on. Now, we did run a little bit over on some of our previous breakouts and plenary discussions, but it's not an issue. We still have some time tomorrow as well. So we're going to shorten ever so slightly the next breakout. I know Van mentioned that you're going to go, and Clara, I know, is also heading off to another meeting on the hour. What we thought we would do now is we need to recognize that you know, that there's been learning associated with the context that we've experienced, and I think a lot of today has touched on that. But there's also been some aspirations and intents that were previously highlighted, some of them already resulting in various actions that are ongoing associated with the cohort. We want to reference that which was previously planned, of course, not without the understanding that there is the emergent, which may be more relevant and pressing. But to remind you, we met, at least those of you who's been on this journey for a while, we met in Antwerp, or linked to Antwerp Management School in 2020, where the cohort started documenting against various themes and topics a number of I's, and they were, if I remember correctly, inquiries, ideas, intentions, initiatives, insights, and of course, the hope was that those inquiries, ideas, intentions, initiatives, and insights will ultimately lead to another I, which is impact. So what we're going to do now is to invite, as a segue into tomorrow, we're going to invite you into a slightly different, yet again, small group, to share some of the updates that you hold about the inquiries, ideas, intentions, initiatives, and insights that have been generated across the cohort. Now, it may be possible that some of what you've held, projects or ideas, have been put on hold. More urgent things have come up. It's also possible that some of the work and the learning that's been required to ensure progress has become more about the strategies you devise or employ in dealing with this changing context. So in other words, it may no longer be solely related to a specific action or idea which you stated in November. And it's perfectly fine if that's the case. We acknowledge the possibility that, you know, that essentially we sometimes need to pivot in new directions. But we do have, as a reference, the dashboard for those of you who's been looking at it. And I'll just paste the link on chat for those of you who perhaps haven't looked at it in a while. So there's the dashboard. In fact, I'm just going to put it on the screen just for a second, just so you can get a flavor of it. We're not going to look at the detail, but basically we had inquiries that deals with bridging learning and impact, measuring impact, recruitment in the SDGs, some ideas that were stated, some intentions, some initiatives. In other words, something that's moved beyond an intention towards starting an initiative, building some insight. And of course, you can all look at that at your own time. But for those of you who's been close to the cohort's work, you may be ready to share some updates relating to those. So what we're going to do in the next breakout is ask you, it's basically to determine where the work is at, okay? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to suggest for about 15 minutes that you just touch on what has been completed, progressed, or stalled. Any key takeaways about creating change. And I'll put this in the chat now. What's been completed, progressed, or stalled? Any key takeaways or learnings about creating change? In doing so, we may want to applaud accomplishments, recognize failures, and distill any of the tricks, tactics, and strategies that came to the fore. And I urge you, as you hear from others, when you engage with your peers and giving them feedback on what they share, try and place emphasis on clarifying what it is that they're sharing rather than giving them advice. So let's do it in an appreciative way. I also want to invite you, if there are any new or updated inquiries, ideas, or initiatives that emerge, we will be asking you to submit those to the dashboard so that we can capture them and we can keep track of that. So I'm going to paste that into the chat now. There's quite a few questions. You may not be able to cover all of that. But Claire Summers has set up a slightly different grouping of rooms for us. Claire, are you ready with those? I just want to check. Claire,
yes. And can I please have confirmation on the timing? You just said 15. Do you want it to be 15 or 20?
I think let's go for 17 minutes, since it's 3 minutes past the hour, so that leaves us 10 minutes to close. So if you can just set it to 17.
And if we see this as just starting to recognize and remember and the issue, the inspirations and so on, with a view to coming back tomorrow to deepen, John. So it's just allowing them to bubble a little more to the surface.
Yeah, so it's absolutely just an opportunity to recognize and get an update on the various things that people have been working on. So you may find yourself in a group where people are reporting on something that they started 2 years ago. Or you have an idea for something new that you've just decided you're going to be doing. You're welcome to share that as well. But we're starting to create a segue towards tomorrow. And I think we're going to set up the groups and go into those groups now. So we've pasted the suggested questions for discussion in the chat. And then when we come back into plenary in 17 minutes from now, we're going to close with some closing reflections and a short preview of what happens tomorrow. Thanks so much. Okay. Everyone back there? Great. Thank you so much. We have, gosh, the tyranny of the clock, right? We have just under 10 minutes to bring this gathering, at least for today, to a pause. There is, of course, plenty of opportunity to continue tomorrow. I need to recognize that the last round was perhaps a little bit rushed, but of course it's just a precursor to tomorrow. So maybe not everyone had a chance to share what they wanted to share in this last discussion. Our first movement today, if tomorrow is the second part, was intended as an opportunity to reconnect with yourself in the context of the cohort, but also crucially to connect with a few others, and to do so in the context of forming part of a growing global community of hope and action. We tried to design it in such a way that you could connect with as many people as possible today, so that you could explore alongside them their context, their unique trajectory, and maybe to glean and share some inspiration. We know that you may have some thoughts to share now, some thoughts and ideas. However, we are going to ask you to hold on to them. And for those rejoining us tomorrow, to share. Of course, if you have anything that you want to put in the chat, that's helpful, and you're more than welcome to do that as well. But we're not going to have a report back or a checkup just yet. At this stage, I also want to acknowledge that two things. The first is that two of the people that were going to join us for today's session could not make it. Both of them are located in Colorado. So Julie Wagner, who some of you may have met at previous events, is taking some time to support her community. And Gretchen Peterson and Travis, who some of you met on the meeting yesterday, is also not able to join us. So that's from Boulder and from Colorado State University. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and our thoughts are with the community there. Then there are a few of you that will not be able to join us tomorrow. We are sorry about that. It's a pity. You will leave a hole. And, you know, in the words of Peter Block, loss is an element of engagement. So let's acknowledge that. But if you have anything to share in terms of hopes for tomorrow, please feel free to put that in the chat so that we have some of your input as well. In order to bridge us and just to kind of set up for tomorrow's work, I'm going to hand over to Anders Aspling, and then we'll bring the meeting to a close, or at least today's call to a close. Thanks. Over to you, Anders.
Thank you, John. And for those leaving us that we will miss you tomorrow. You should be aware of that. If you do have anything that you would like to give us or provide us with for tomorrow, please put that in the chat, as John said. Something which you think you would contribute to our work tomorrow. Because we will have an opportunity tomorrow when we start to clarify and state our focused and essential intentions. And we do have a resource at hand, and that's the 24 hours from now. Grounded wisdom, in my mind, and from my experience, requires more than intellectual reaction and comment. And that's pretty much what we've had time to share and do this today. It requires deeper reflection involving your whole self, your history and your experiences, your intuition, your emotions. The whole spectrum of both rational and irrational logic, if that makes sense. So let's take today's sharing with us now and have a good 24 hours to ponder what we've heard and said. Tomorrow we will distill the essential and hold on to it. And then we will also attend to what is needed for the cohort to provide us with the most appropriate support for the year to come. That will be part of tomorrow as well. So ready for a pause. And thanks to everyone. It's been wonderful seeing you again, and looking forward to be back with you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Anders. And also thank you to Claire Maxwell and Claire Summer, and to everyone who joined us for today's part of the first gathering of this year's cohort. We look forward to your contribution tomorrow. Please feel free to share further in the chat. Feel free to stick around for a few minutes. If you have anything else that you'd like to discuss, I'll be around for a bit. And we'll hopefully see many of you tomorrow. Thank you.